A little girl stops before a luxurious shop window, mesmerized by a dress she could never have. The store manager cruelly shoos her away, but an unexpected witness sees the whole thing and decides to change that girl's destiny forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. And now, on with the story. Fifth Avenue was buzzing that Thursday afternoon, just like it always did, with its packed city buses, its street vendors hawking ice-cold water, its executives jaywalking in a hurry, its tourists snapping photos in front of the Met. New York never sleeps, they say, and it's true that the city seems to have an internal engine that never shuts off. A giant heart that beats without rest, pushing millions of people forward, each one carrying their own dreams, their fears, their bills to pay, their lost loves. In the middle of all that hustle, all that rush that makes people look only at their own feet and never at who's beside them, there was a little girl. She was 5, maybe 6 if you looked closer, but life on the streets has a cruel way of blurring a child's age. Her small feet were dirty, bruised by the hot pavement, and the little dress she wore had once been white, but was now an undefinable color, stained by time and the city's grime. Her brown hair was tangled, pulled back in a crooked ponytail someone had made with an old rubber band, and her brown eyes had that strange glint of someone who learned far too early how to hide hunger, fear, and loneliness. Her name was Isabella, but no one had called her that in a long time. On the street she was just the little girl who slept near the subway station, who asked for change at the lights, who sometimes got a piece of bread from the corner deli when the owner was in a good mood. Isabella had gotten used to being invisible, to passing through people as if she were a ghost, something you glimpse and forget the next second. But she did exist, and inside her, there was still something that life hadn't managed to completely tear away. The ability to dream, to imagine that one day things could be different. That afternoon, Isabella was walking slowly down the sidewalk, dodging people who passed without looking down, without noticing she was there. She had just been given a slightly bruised banana by a woman leaving the grocery store, and she saved half of it in her dress, pocket for later, for when the hunger hit again. That's when she saw the window display. It was a children's clothing store, one of those expensive shops you only find in places like Fifth Avenue, with huge, clean windows that reflected the afternoon sun. Inside, everything was white and gold, with soft lights that made it feel like you were entering a magical place, a world where everything was perfect and clean and smelled wonderful. But what caught Isabella's eye was the dress. It was a pale pink dress, almost a peach color, with delicate white flower embroidery along the hem. The fabric looked so soft you just wanted to touch it, and it had a big bow in the back, the kind of bow princesses wear in the movies Isabella sometimes watched through the windows of electronics stores. It was the kind of dress a girl would wear to a birthday party, or to a Sunday family lunch, or simply on a day when she wanted to feel special, beautiful, as if the whole world belonged to her. Isabella stopped in front of the window. Her small, dirty hands slowly reached for the glass, and she pressed her open, palms against the cool, smooth surface, as if by doing so she could touch the dress, as if she could feel the soft fabric against her skin. Her wide eyes didn't blink, and on her face was a mixture of hope and sadness, so profound it hurt to look at. She knew it wasn't for her. She knew girls like her didn't go into stores like that, didn't wear dresses like that. But still, for a few minutes, she let her heart imagine. What if she could have a dress like that? What if she could go to a party? What if she had a mother who would comb her hair and tie the bow in the back? What if she had a real house with a real bed, with real food? What if she were like the other girls she saw walking down the street, holding hands with their parents, laughing, talking, complaining about silly things Isabella couldn't even understand, because she'd never had the privilege of complaining about anything? The store door opened with the chime of a little bell, and a woman stepped out. She must have been in her 40s, with blonde hair pulled into a perfect bun, flawless makeup, and designer clothes that screamed elegance and money. This was Valerie, the store manager, and she had the air of someone used to being in charge, to dividing the world into those who deserved to be there and those who didn't. When she saw Isabella leaning against the window, her dirty hands on the glass she herself had cleaned that morning, Valerie felt something twist inside her. It wasn't compassion, It was disgust. It was anger. It was the kind of contempt some people feel for those they consider inferior. "Hey you, get out of here." "Now," Valerie said, her voice loud enough to catch the attention of passers-by. Isabella turned, startled, and took a step back. "You're getting smudges all over everything," Valerie continued, pointing at the marks from the girl's hands on the glass. "What do you think this store is? A playground for you to mess around in. Go on before I call security." Isabella felt her face flush. She wanted to say she wasn't doing anything wrong, that she was just looking, that she hadn't even touched anything but the glass. But the words wouldn't come out. They never did when she needed them most. She lowered her eyes to the ground and started to walk away slowly, stumbling over her own feet because she was nervous and scared. But Valerie wasn't finished. As if humiliating a 5-year-old wasn't enough, she continued, now in an even louder, almost theatrical voice, as if wanting to ensure everyone around heard and agreed. "These street kids are a plague on this city," she said, crossing her arms. "They're always begging, scaring away customers, making a mess of everything. Somebody should do something, but nobody does, and then it's up to us to deal with it." A few people walking by glanced over, and then looked away as if nothing was happening, as if it were easier to pretend this was normal, that children being treated like trash was just another scene in the daily life of the big city. Others didn't even look, too rushed with their own problems to care about a little girl being humiliated on the sidewalk. Isabella felt her eyes well up with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She had learned a long time ago that crying doesn't help, that no one comes when you cry, that it's better to swallow the pain and move on. She turned to leave but stumbled again, and this time she almost fell. That's when she saw a pair of shoes stop in front of her. They were nice shoes, leather, the kind rich men wear. Isabella slowly lifted her eyes and saw a tall man in a dark grey suit, with black hair combed back, his face serious but not harsh. He was looking at her, and in his eyes was something Isabella wasn't used to seeing in the eyes of adults. Genuine attention, as if she were a real person, not just a problem to be solved or ignored. The man's name was Robert Miller, and he was one of New York's most well-known entrepreneurs. He had built an empire in the tech industry, had his picture in business magazines, and was invited to events where only important people went. Robert had everything money could buy: a huge apartment on the Upper East Side, an imported car, designer clothes, trips to anywhere in the world. But he also had something no amount of money can take away: an old pain, an emptiness he had carried for years that no professional achievement had managed to fill. Robert had lost his daughter 5 years ago, not lost in the sense that she had gone away, but lost in the sense that he had let her go away. Caroline had been the love of his life, the woman he had married at 25, when he was just starting his career and had nothing but dreams and ambition. They had a daughter, Sophia, a little girl with curly hair and an easy laugh, who had lit up Robert's life in a way he never imagined possible. But professional success had come quickly, and with it came the business trips, the endless meetings, the weekends at the office. Robert had convinced himself he was doing it all for them, to give Caroline and Sophia a better life, but the truth was, he was losing himself in his work, using success as an excuse not to face the problems growing at home. Caroline had tried to talk to him, had asked him to be more present, but Robert always had an excuse, always had an important deal to close, always had something more urgent. Until the day Caroline said she couldn't take it anymore. She took Sophia and left, moving in with her mother in Stamford, Connecticut, and Robert was left alone in the huge apartment, surrounded by luxury but empty inside. He had tried to fight for custody of his daughter, but Caroline had too much proof that he was never around, and the judge had sided with her. Robert could see Sophia twice a month, but the visits were tense, filled with uncomfortable silences, and over time they became rarer and rarer. Sophia was 5 when they separated. Now she was 10, and Robert barely knew her anymore. She had grown up away from him, and every time he looked at an old photo of his daughter, he felt a tightness in his chest so strong that sometimes he had to sit down and take a deep breath to keep from breaking down. He had money, he had power, he had success, but he had lost the only thing that truly mattered, And now, standing there on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, looking at this 5-year-old girl with bruised feet and a dirty dress, Robert felt something stir inside him. It wasn't just compassion, it was recognition. It was as if he were seeing Sophia in this girl, as if he were seeing all the times he hadn't been there, all the times he had chosen work over family, all the times he had thought money was more important than presence. He had left the office early that day because he was exhausted, tired of meetings that went nowhere, tired of people who only wanted something from him. He had sent his driver home and decided to walk a bit, to breathe the city air, to try to clear his head. And then he had seen that scene, the woman yelling at the girl, the child trying not to cry, the people passing by as if nothing was happening. Robert turned to Valerie, who was still standing at the store's entrance, with that look of superiority on her face. "Ma'am, could you please repeat what you just said to this child?" he said, his voice calm but with a firmness that made Valerie blink in surprise. Valerie looked at him, annoyed that someone was meddling in her business. "I told her to get out of here. She's smudging the window and scaring away customers. We have standards to maintain, and we can't have this type of person at our storefront." "This type of person," Robert repeated, and there was something dangerous in the calmness of his voice. "You're referring to a 5-year-old child as this type of person." Valerie crossed her arms defensively. "Look, I don't know who you are, but this is none of your business. I'm doing my job." Robert took a step forward, and for the first time, Valerie seemed to realize she might have picked a fight with the wrong person. "My name is Robert Miller," he said, and saw the recognition dawn in her eyes. "And I think it is my business when I see a child being humiliated on the street. Do you know who owns this store?" Valerie swallowed hard. "It's the Thompson Group," she answered, her voice no longer so firm. Robert nodded. "I know Andrew Thompson very well. We're partners on a few projects. I'm sure he'll love to hear that his store manager is out on the street humiliating children and calling them a plague." Valerie's face went white. She opened her mouth to say something, but no sound came out. Robert didn't wait for a response. He knelt down to Isabella's level, and for the first time since it all began, the girl looked directly at him. "What's your name?" he asked, and his voice was gentle, without the condescending tone adults sometimes use with children. "Isabella," she answered softly, almost in a whisper. "Isabella," Robert repeated, and smiled in a way that made something inside her calm down a little. "Do you like that dress in the window?" Isabella looked at the dress and then back at Robert, unsure if it was a trick, if he was going to laugh at her or send her away too. But there was something in his eyes that seemed sincere, so she nodded her head slowly. "It is a beautiful dress," Robert said. "You didn't do anything wrong by looking at it. The glass can be cleaned, Isabella. But the mean words that woman said to you, those don't clean off so easily. Those stay with us for a long time." Isabella didn't know what to say. She had never had an adult talk to her like that, as if she mattered, as if her feelings were real and valid. She felt the tears return, but this time they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of something she couldn't even name, something between relief and confusion, and a tiny spark of hope she was afraid to feel because hope hurts when you lose it. Robert noticed the girl was shivering, and he took off his suit jacket, placing it over her small shoulders. The fabric was soft and warm, and it smelled nice like expensive cologne. Isabella pulled the jacket closer, feeling protected for the first time in a long time. It was at that moment that a woman approached. She was young, maybe 25, wearing a janitor's uniform, her face tired from someone who wakes up very early and works very hard. She stopped next to Robert and looked at Isabella with concern. "I know this girl," the woman said. "My name is Juliana. I clean the offices nearby and I always see her around here. She sleeps near the subway station." Robert looked at Juliana and then at Isabella. Was the girl on the street all alone? Where were her parents? Juliana shook her head sadly. "I don't know. I've never seen anyone with her. Sometimes there's a man who watches her from a distance, but I don't know who he is. It seems like he uses her to beg for money, you know how it is." Robert felt anger rise within him. A man using a 5-year-old child to make money. Another one of the city's invisible cruelties. Another one of those things everyone knows happens, but no one does anything about. "Do you know where this man is now?" he asked Juliana. She looked around nervously. "I don't know. Sometimes he shows up in the late afternoon. But look, I don't want to get into any trouble. Those people can be dangerous." Robert understood her fear. Juliana probably had her own problems, her own difficult life, and couldn't afford to get into more trouble. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "You've been very kind." Juliana nodded and looked at Isabella with the kind of gaze that knows what it's like to fight to survive. "I hope the girl will be okay," she said, and walked away, disappearing into the crowd that continued to flow by without stopping. Robert stood there for a moment, thinking about what to do. He couldn't just leave Isabella there on the street, not after everything he had seen and heard. But he also couldn't just take her away without a second thought. There were protocols, there were laws, there were a series of things that needed to be done the right way. But as he was thinking, something happened that changed everything. A woman appeared, walking quickly, with a clipboard in her hand and an ID badge hanging from her neck. She was in her 50s, with short hair and that efficient air of someone used to solving problems. "Excuse me for interrupting," she said, addressing Robert. "My name is Marissa. I'm a social worker. I saw what happened here and I'd like to help with the child situation." Robert looked at her, relieved to have someone who seemed to know what to do. Marissa knelt down to speak with Isabella, asking questions about where she lived, if she had family, if she had anywhere to go. But there was something strange about the questions, something too rushed, and Robert realized that Marissa seemed more interested in getting the girl out of there than in truly understanding her situation. It was then that Valerie, who had been standing at the store's entrance the whole time, suddenly shouted, "She stole something!" she yelled, pointing at Isabella. "I saw her put something in her pocket when she was in front of the window. Call the police. This girl is a thief." The world seemed to stop for a second. All the people who had been passing by suddenly stopped to look. Some started to take out their phones to film because in New York, nothing becomes news faster than a public scandal. Isabella froze in fear, her eyes wide, her whole body trembling. Robert felt the anger explode inside him. He turned to Valerie with such a harsh expression that she took a step back. "You're accusing a 5-year-old child of theft without any proof," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Let's see who's right. Isabella, can you show me what's in your pocket?" Isabella, with trembling hands, pulled out the half of the banana she had saved earlier. That was all she had. Robert took the banana and showed it to Valerie. "Did this come from your store?" he asked sarcastically. "Do you sell bruised bananas now?" Valerie turned red, but she didn't back down. "She must have hidden it somewhere else then," she insisted, but her voice lacked the same conviction. Robert turned to the crowd that had formed. "Did anyone here see this girl enter the store or take anything?" he asked loudly. No one answered. The people began to disperse, disappointed not to have the drama they expected. Marissa, the social worker, approached again. "Look, Mr. Miller, I think it's best if I take the girl with me now. I'll take her to the proper shelter." But something in the way she said it made Robert suspicious. Why the rush? Why wasn't she asking more questions, trying to better understand the situation? And how did she know his name when he hadn't introduced himself to her? "No," Robert said firmly. "I'll handle this personally. I'll call the right contacts, make sure the girl is well taken care of." Marissa seemed annoyed for a second, but then forced a smile. "As you wish, sir. But if you need any help, here's my card." And she handed him a card that looked official with a logo and everything, but Robert put it in his pocket without looking closely, still suspicious. Meanwhile, Isabella was still there, tiny with the huge jacket on her shoulders, not fully understanding what was happening but realizing that something had changed, that maybe for the first time in her life someone was actually fighting for her, not just giving her a handout or feeling sorry for her, but seeing her as a person who deserved dignity and respect. Robert looked at her and made a decision that would change his life forever. He wasn't going to let that girl go back to the street. Not that day, not after everything that had happened. He was going to find out the whole truth about Isabella, about who she was where she came from, and why such a small child was alone on the streets of such a big and cruel city. And he was going to do it not out of charity, not to feel like a hero, but because looking at that girl, he saw a chance to fix something that had been broken inside him for a long time, a chance to maybe, finally, do the right thing. Night had fallen over New York, and the city that never sleeps continued to pulse with its lights, its cars, its constant noise that seems to never end. Robert was in the back of his car, with Isabella sitting next to him, so small that the seatbelt was crooked on her thin body. She had been quiet the whole ride, looking out the window with those huge eyes that seemed to be trying to capture every detail of that moment, as if she were afraid of waking up and finding out it was all just a dream. Robert had called Julia, his assistant, and asked her to cancel all his appointments for the rest of the day. Julia had been surprised because Robert never, ever cancelled anything, but she hadn't asked any questions. He had also called his lawyer, Dr. Harris, explaining the situation and asking for guidance on how to legally proceed with the case of a homeless child. Harris had been cautious, reminding Robert that he couldn't just take a child home without following legal procedures, but he had also agreed to contact Child Protective Services and trusted social workers to assess the situation. But while all the bureaucratic parts were being sorted out, Robert wasn't going to let Isabella go back to the street. He had decided to take her to a private hospital first, to make sure she was healthy, that there was nothing serious beyond the obvious malnutrition and the wounds on her feet, and after that he would figure out what to do. The car stopped in front of Mount Sinai Hospital, and Robert got out first, then turned to help Isabella. She hesitated before getting out, looking at the huge illuminated building as if it were a castle from another world. Robert held out his hand to her, and after a moment of hesitation she took it. Her hand was so small in his, so fragile, that Robert felt that tightness in his chest again, the one he had felt on the sidewalk. Inside the hospital, the nurses were surprised when they saw Robert Miller, the famous entrepreneur, walk in with a street girl. But he didn't offer any explanations, just asked them to call the best available pediatrician and say it was urgent. In a few minutes they were taken to a private room, where a doctor in her 50s, with greying hair and a kind look, was waiting. "My name is Dr. Evans," she said, kneeling down to Isabella's level. "And what's your name, sweetie?" "Isabella," the girl answered softly, and the doctor smiled in a way that made Isabella relax a little. "Isabella, what a beautiful name. I'm going to need to examine you to see if everything is okay, all right? I won't do anything to hurt you, I promise." The examination lasted almost an hour. Dr. Evans was gentle and careful, talking to Isabella the whole time to distract her while she checked everything: her heart, her lungs, her eyes, her ears. She cleaned and bandaged the wounds on the girl's feet, which were inflamed from walking barefoot on the hot pavement for so long. She ordered blood tests to check for anemia or other nutritional deficiencies. And in the end, she called Robert for a private conversation in the hallway. "She's malnourished, but nothing that can't be reversed with proper nutrition," the doctor said, her voice heavy with a professional sadness. The kind of sadness of someone who has seen many children in similar situations. "The wounds on her feet will heal well. But Mr. Miller, this girl has been through a lot. She's scared, distrustful. She's going to need much more than medical care. She's going to need safety, affection, someone to show her that the world isn't just cruelty." Robert nodded, swallowing the lump that had formed in his throat. "I'll take care of it," he said, and realized he was making a promise that went far beyond what he had planned when he stopped on that sidewalk a few hours ago. When they returned to the room, Isabella was sitting on the examination table, swinging her little legs because they didn't reach the floor. A nurse had given her a juice box and a pack of cookies, and she was eating slowly, savoring each piece as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Robert sat next to her and watched. For a moment, thinking how unfair it was that such a small child had to live with so much hunger, that a simple cookie became a treasure. "Isabella," he said gently, "I'm going to take you to a safe place tonight, okay? A place where you can sleep in a real bed, take a bath, eat properly. Do you want that?" Isabella stopped chewing and looked at him with an expression that was hard to read. There was hope there, but also fear, distrust. "And are you going to send me away after?" she asked, her voice so low that Robert almost didn't hear it. The question hit Robert like a punch. This 5-year-old girl had already learned that nothing lasts, that everything is temporary, that people appear and disappear, that trusting is dangerous. "No," he answered, and placed his hand on her shoulder gently. "I'm not going to send you away. I'm going to find out what happened to you, where you came from, and I'm going to make sure you stay in a place where you'll be properly cared for. I promise." Isabella studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decide if she could believe him or not. And then, slowly, she nodded her head. "Okay," she said, and went back to eating her cookie. Robert had an apartment on the Upper East Side, one of New York's most exclusive neighborhoods, but he wasn't going to take Isabella there that night. Not yet. Instead, he called his mother, Celia, who lived in a large house in Forest Hills, Queens. Celia was a 65-year-old woman, a widow for 10 years, who had dedicated her life to raising Robert and his 2 sisters after her husband died young from a heart condition. She was the kind of person who always had room for one more at the table, who always knew what to say to calm someone down, who had that maternal way that makes anyone feel safe. "Mom, I need your help," Robert said when she answered the phone, and he got straight to the point because he knew if he started explaining too much, he would get emotional. "I'm with a little girl who was on the street. She's 5 years old and has nowhere to go. Can I bring her to your house tonight?" There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, and Robert imagined his mother processing the information, probably with that surprised expression she always made when he said something unexpected. "Bring her over, son," she finally replied, her voice firm and welcoming. "I'll get the guest room ready and bring some clothes too. A child needs clean clothes." Robert felt a huge sense of relief. "Thanks, Mom. I'm on my way." Celia's house was cozy, with plants on the porch, the smell of cake in the air, and the kind of decor that isn't from a magazine but makes you feel at home. When Robert arrived, with Isabella, Celia was waiting at the door, and the first thing she did was kneel down and open her arms to the girl. "Hi, my love," she said with that sweet voice that had calmed Robert in so many difficult moments of his life. "I'm so glad you came. My name is Celia, but you can call me Grandma if you like. Come on, I'll show you your room." Isabella looked at Robert, as if asking for permission, and he gave her an encouraging nod. "Go ahead," he said. "Grandma Celia is the nicest person you'll ever meet." Celia took Isabella's hand and led her inside, talking the whole time about simple, comforting things. The guest room had been made up with clean, fresh-smelling sheets, and there was an oversized nightgown that had belonged to one of Robert's sisters as a child, but it would do for Isabella to sleep in. Celia took the girl to the bathroom and helped her take a bath, carefully washing her tangled hair, gently cleaning away the dirt that had accumulated from days or maybe weeks on the street. When Isabella came out of the bath, wrapped in a large, soft towel, she looked like a different child. Her wet hair fell straight down her back, and without the layer of dirt, you could see she had a delicate face, with freckles on her nose, and those cheeks that should have been full, but were too sunken for a child her age. Celia dressed her in the nightgown, patiently combed her hair, and then took Isabella to the kitchen. Robert was sitting at the table, and when he saw the girl walk in, clean and looking more relaxed, he felt his heart ache again. She seemed so fragile, so vulnerable, but at the same time, there was a strength in her that he admired, a strength that had allowed her to survive on the street when so many other children couldn't. "Grandma Celia made soup," Isabella said shyly, sitting in the chair next to Robert. "She said soup is good when your tummy has been empty for a long time." Robert looked at his mother, who was in the kitchen warming up the soup with her efficient manner, and felt an immense gratitude. His mother always knew what to do, always knew how to take care of people, and he realized in that moment how much he had missed that in his own life, how much he had distanced himself from his family in pursuit of success, and had lost these simple but essential things along the way. Celia brought the soup to the table, along with fresh bread and butter, and stood there watching Isabella eat, with that motherly look that knows how to recognize real hunger. The girl ate slowly, savoring each spoonful, and when she finished the first bowl, Celia asked if she wanted more. Isabella hesitated as if not wanting to seem greedy, but then she nodded and Celia filled the bowl again without making any comment that might embarrass the child. After dinner, Celia took Isabella back to the room and tucked her into bed. The girl sank into the soft mattress as if she had never felt anything so comfortable in her life, and Celia pulled the blanket up to her chin, tucking her in snugly. "You're safe here, my love," she said, stroking Isabella's hair. "No one is going to hurt you. No one is going to take you away tonight. You can sleep peacefully." Isabella closed her eyes, but Celia noticed she was fighting sleep, as if afraid to let her guard down. That's how people who live on the street sleep. Always alert, always ready to wake up and run if necessary. Celia sat there on the edge of the bed, softly humming an old lullaby, until she finally saw Isabella's little body relax and her breathing become deeper and more regular. When Celia returned to the living room, she found Robert sitting on the sofa with his head in his hands. She sat next to him and placed a hand on her son's back, making that circular motion she always did when he was little and worried about something. "Tell your mother what's going on, son," she said gently, and Robert told her. He told her about the scene on Fifth Avenue, about the woman humiliating Isabella, about the sense of recognition he had felt looking at that girl, about how he couldn't stop thinking about Sophia, and how he had failed as a father. He told her about the cleaning lady who said a man was using Isabella to get money, about the fake social worker who had appeared out of nowhere and knew his name without him introducing himself, about all the strange things that had happened. Celia listened to everything in silence, and when Robert finished, she was thoughtful for a moment before speaking. "You're doing the right thing, Robert," she said finally. "But you need to understand that this isn't a simple decision. This girl isn't a project you can fix and then file away. She's a person with trauma, with a history, with needs that go beyond what money can solve. If you're going to get involved in this, you have to be prepared to see it through to the end." Robert looked at his mother and saw the wisdom in her eyes, the kind of wisdom that comes from having lived a long time and seen a lot. "I know, Mom," he said, "and I think that's exactly why I need to do this. Because I failed Sophia. I wasn't there when she needed me. I chose work, money, success, and I lost my daughter in the process. I can't bring Sophia back. I can't undo the mistakes I made. But maybe, if I can make a difference in this girl's life, maybe I can in some way redeem myself." Celia squeezed her son's hand. "Redemption doesn't work like that, son. You can't use another child to fix your mistakes with Sophia, but if you genuinely want to help this girl because she needs it and because it's the right thing to do, then I'm with you. We'll find out her story, we'll make sure she's taken care of, and we'll do it the right way." Robert nodded, feeling grateful to have such a wise mother. As they talked, neither of them noticed that Isabella had woken up and was standing at the hallway door, listening to their conversation. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood enough to know that these people were talking about her, about helping her, about not sending her away. And for the first time in a long time, Isabella felt something she had forgotten was possible to feel. True hope. Not that fragile, scared hope you have when you're looking at a dress in a window, but a strong hope, based on the genuine kindness she had seen in that man's eyes and in the gestures of that woman who had called her "my love" and had sung her to sleep. The next day, Robert woke up early and started making calls. First, he called Dr. Harris, his lawyer, who had already contacted Child Protective Services and scheduled a meeting for that afternoon. Then he called a private investigator he knew, a man named Mark, who had worked on a few cases for Robert's company and had a reputation for being discreet and efficient. "Mark, I need you to investigate a situation for me," Robert said when the investigator answered. "It's about a child, a 5-year-old girl who was living on the street near Fifth Avenue. I need to know where she came from, if she has a family, what happened to put her on the street, and there's more. A woman showed up yesterday claiming to be a social worker, but there was something strange about her. I want you to find out who she really is. If you were in Robert's shoes, would you have taken Isabella in or called the authorities immediately? Let us know in the comments." Mark asked a few questions, jotted down all the details, and promised to start the investigation immediately. Robert knew it would be expensive, but money was the one thing he had in abundance, and if he could use It to help Isabella, then it was worth every penny. Meanwhile, at Celia's house, Isabella woke up confused, taking a few seconds to remember where she was. The room was bright and airy, with white curtains that let the morning sun stream in gently. She sat up in bed, still wearing the oversized nightgown, and looked around as if trying to understand if this was real or if she was about to wake up back on the hard, cold sidewalk. The door opened slowly, and Celia came in with a tray in her hand. "Good morning, my love," she said, with that warm smile. "I brought you breakfast. There's toast with butter, chocolate milk and fruit. Do you like fruit?" Isabella nodded, still a bit wary, but starting to relax. Celia placed the tray on the bed and sat next to the girl, watching as she ate. She didn't rush her, didn't comment on the amount, just sat there, present and calm, conveying a sense of safety. "Isabella," Celia said gently after the girl finished eating, "do you remember where you came from? Do you remember your mom or your dad?" Isabella stopped chewing and stared at her lap. I had a mom," she said softly, "but she got sick and went away. There was a man who said he would take care of me, but he just wanted me to ask for money on the streets. If I didn't get enough money, he would get mad and wouldn't give me food." Celia felt tears well up, but held them back because she didn't want to scare Isabella. "And do you remember this man's name? Or where you lived before you were on the street?" Isabella shook her head. "I don't remember his name. Everyone just called him Uncle. And the house was far away. You had to take a lot of buses. There was a playground nearby, but I couldn't play because he was always watching." Celia mentally noted all this information to pass on to Robert later. "Okay, my love," she said, hugging the girl gently. "You're safe now. No one is going to make you do anything you don't want to do." Later that morning, when Robert arrived at Celia's house, he brought bags full of new clothes for Isabella. He had bought them at a nearby mall, carefully choosing things that were comfortable and pretty. Pants, shirts, a jacket, new sneakers, and yes, he couldn't resist. He had also bought a dress similar to the one in the window, pale pink with delicate embroidery. When Isabella saw the clothes, her eyes widened. "Is this all for me?" she asked in disbelief. "It is," Robert replied, crouching down to her level. "And there's this one too," he said, pulling the dress from the bag. "Remember the one you liked in the window? This one is similar. Do you want to try it on?" Isabella took the dress with both hands, as if holding something very fragile and precious. With Celia's help, she put on the dress, and when she looked at herself in the mirror, something changed in her face. For the first time since Robert had found her, she smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it was genuine, coming from some deep place inside her, where there was still a little girl who liked pretty things and feeling special. Robert and Celia exchanged a look, and neither of them had to say anything. They knew that moment was important, that the dress wasn't just a piece of cloth, but a symbol of dignity, of worth, of belonging. In the afternoon, Robert took Isabella to the meeting at Child Protective Services. It was difficult, because the girl got scared seeing so many adults asking questions, but Robert stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand, making sure she knew she wasn't alone. The caseworker in charge, a woman named Teresa, was kind but firm, explaining that Isabella would need to undergo a full evaluation, that they would need to find out if she had any family, that there were legal procedures that had to be followed. "Mr. Miller," the caseworker said, addressing Robert privately after the meeting, "I understand you want to help, and that's admirable, but you need to understand that you can't just decide to keep this child. If we find her family, she will have to return to them, unless it's proven that the family is unfit. And if we don't find any family, she will need to be placed for adoption through the legal channels." Robert knew this, but he still felt a pang of anguish hearing the words. "I understand," he said, "but while this is being sorted out, I would like to be responsible for her. I have the financial means, I have family support, and the girl is already starting to trust me. It would be traumatic for her to be taken to a shelter now." Teresa was thoughtful. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "But I'll need full documentation. I'll need to make regular visits, and you will have to work with us on this investigation. If you agree to all of this, I can grant a temporary provisional custody while we investigate the case. Robert agreed to everything immediately. He would do whatever it took to keep Isabella safe. That night, while Isabella slept at Celia's house, wearing the new pajamas Robert had bought, Mark, the investigator, called with the first pieces of information. "Robert, I've got some interesting things here," he said, his voice serious. "First, about the woman who introduced herself as a social worker. The name on her badge is fake. There's no Marissa working for any official social services agency in New York. But I did a search and found a woman with the same physical description who works for an organization that claims to be an NGO for child protection, but actually has ties to people involved in child exploitation rings." Robert felt his blood run cold. "Are you saying that woman was going to try to take Isabella for some kind of scheme?" "It's a strong possibility," Mark replied. "And there's more. I managed to talk to some people who work in the Fifth Avenue area, street vendors, cleaning staff. Several of them know Isabella. They say she showed up there about 3 months ago, always accompanied by a man they call Uncle, just like the girl said. This man would leave her to beg for money and then come back at the end of the day to collect what she'd gotten. If she didn't get enough, he wouldn't feed her." Robert clenched his fist so tightly, his knuckles turned white. "And this man, did you get any information on him?" "I'm working on it," Mark said. "But here's the part that will interest you. I found something about Isabella's past. I spoke with a nurse who works at a health clinic near where the girl was first seen. She remembers a woman who brought a little girl for treatment about 6 months ago. The woman was very sick, appeared to have some kind of serious illness, and said she couldn't take care of her daughter. The nurse tried to refer them to social services, but when she came back with the papers, the woman and the girl were gone." "This woman, did you find out who she was?" Robert asked, his heart beating faster. "Not yet, but I'm following that lead. What I can tell you is that the girl's description matches Isabella. Same age, same physical features. And there's one more thing, Robert. The nurse said the woman mentioned a name that might be the girl's family name. She said the last name was Peterson, and that she had a brother who lived somewhere in upstate New York, but they had grown apart a long time ago because of a family disagreement." Robert felt a mix of hope and apprehension. Peterson was a very common last name, which meant it could take time to find the right family. But at least it was a start, a clue that could lead to answers. "Keep digging, Mark," Robert said. "I need to know the whole truth about what happened to Isabella. She deserves to know where she came from, and I need to make sure she never goes back to that kind of situation." After hanging up, Robert sat there in the dark of his apartment, thinking about everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. His life had completely changed. He, who had spent years focused only on business and profits, was now involved in a mission that had nothing to do with money or professional success. It was about saving a child, about doing the right thing, about maybe finally finding a purpose that was bigger than himself. And as he thought about it, Robert realized something that surprised him. For the first time in 5 years, since Caroline and Sophia had left his life, he felt truly alive, truly connected to something that mattered. The pain was still there, the guilt was still there, but now there was also hope, the possibility of redemption, the chance to make a difference in the life of someone who really needed it. He didn't yet know all the secrets he was about to uncover, didn't know the twists and turns that were to come, didn't know that Isabella's story was more connected to his own than he could ever imagine. But he knew one thing for sure. He was not going to give up on that girl, no matter what he discovered, no matter the obstacles that appeared in his path. Isabella had crossed his path for a reason, and he was going to find out what that reason was, even if it meant facing truths he had tried to bury in the past. A week had passed since the day Robert found Isabella on Fifth Avenue, and in that week, a lot had changed. Isabella was temporarily living at Celia's house, and she was slowly losing that scared look of someone expecting to be sent away at any moment. She still woke up in the middle of the night sometimes, confused, looking for something only she understood, but Celia was always there, calming her, telling her everything was okay, that she was safe. Robert visited every day, sometimes twice a day. He had completely reorganized his work schedule, delegating meetings to his managers, canceling trips, prioritizing for the first time in his life something that had nothing to do with business. Julia, his assistant, was so surprised by the change that she even asked if he was feeling okay, and Robert had laughed, saying that for the first time in a long time, he was better than ever. But while Isabella was adjusting to her new reality, Mark, the investigator, was uncovering things that went far beyond what anyone had imagined. On a Wednesday afternoon, he called Robert asking for an urgent meeting. "We need to talk in person," he said, and there was something in his voice that told Robert that what he had discovered was serious. They met at a discreet cafe in Soho, far from the places where Robert was easily recognized. Mark was at a table in the back, with a folder full of documents and photos in front of him. When Robert sat down, the investigator got straight to the point. "Robert, what I've found is complicated," he began, pushing the folder toward Robert. "I managed to trace Isabella's past, and the story is sadder than we thought. Her mother's name was Anna Peterson. She was a nurse, worked at a public hospital in the Bronx. She lost her husband in a work accident when Isabella was 2 and was left to raise the girl alone. Anna did what she could, but about a year ago she was diagnosed with an aggressive cancer. She had no close family. Her parents had already passed away, and the only brother she had lived upstate, and they had been estranged for years over an inheritance dispute." Robert felt his heart ache. Isabella had lost her father and then her mother. It was more than any child should have to endure. "And what happened to Anna?" "She tried to keep working while undergoing treatment, but she became very weak. She lost her job, lost the apartment she was renting. That's when this man they call Uncle showed up. His real name is Victor Mendez, and he has a very dirty record. He's been arrested for illegal acts involving the exploitation of minors, but always manages to get away because the victims are afraid to testify. He offered to help Anna, said he knew a place where she could stay while she got treatment, but it was all a lie. What he wanted was access to Isabella." Robert closed his eyes for a moment, trying to control the anger that was building inside him. "And Anna? What happened to her?" Mark looked down, and Robert knew the answer before he even spoke. "She didn't make it, Robert. She passed away about 4 months ago in a public hospital, alone. Isabella wasn't with her because Victor had already separated them. He told Anna he was taking care of the girl, that she was in a safe place, but in reality, he was already using Isabella to beg for money on the streets." The tears came without Robert being able to stop them. He wasn't a man who cried. He had learned early on that businessmen don't show weakness, but at that moment, none of that mattered. He was crying for Isabella, for everything she had been through, for losing her mother without even being able to say goodbye. He was crying for Anna, a woman who had fought alone to raise her daughter and in the end had been deceived by a cruel man. And he was crying for himself, for the daughter he had lost, not because she had passed away, but because he had chosen not to be present. "There's more," Mark said, his voice heavy. "I found Anna's brother. His name is Frank Peterson. He lives in Albany, has a family, works as an accountant. I contacted him, explained the situation. He was shocked when he learned that Anna had passed, and even more shocked when he learned about Isabella. He didn't even know his sister had a daughter, because they had stopped speaking years ago." "And does he want to meet Isabella?" Robert asked, not knowing if he hoped the answer was yes or no. "He said yes, but that he needs to talk to his wife first, see how she reacts to the idea. He has 2 teenage sons, and taking in a 5-year-old niece who has been through so much trauma isn't a simple decision. He asked for a few days to think." Robert nodded, trying to process everything. On one hand, it was good that Isabella had family, someone of her own blood who could take care of her. On the other hand, he was afraid she would be sent to Albany to live with people she didn't know, who might not be prepared to deal with everything she had been through. And there was also, he admitted to himself, a selfish fear of losing her, of no longer being able to be in her life the way he had been for the past week. "And Victor, what did you find out about him?" Robert asked, changing the subject because he couldn't bear to think about losing Isabella right now. Mark opened another folder and showed him photos. "Victor Mendez, 52 years old. He preys on women in vulnerable situations, offers help, gains their trust, and then uses their children to make money. He has a system, always operates in the same area, always has 1 or 2 children working for him at the same time. And there's more. That woman who introduced herself as a social worker, Marissa, she works for him. Their scheme is, when someone tries to help one of the children, she shows up pretending to be an authority and tries to take the child back. If she can't, she warns Victor, and he disappears with the child to another part of the city. That's what happened with Isabella, Robert said, realizing. If I had let that woman take Isabella, she would have vanished and no one would have ever heard from her again. Exactly. But you didn't, and now Victor is nervous. He's lost one of his sources of income, and worse, he lost her to someone with the resources to actually investigate and cause problems for him. My contacts told me he's been asking questions, trying to find out where Isabella is. Robert felt a chill. Does he know where my mother's house is? No, and I was careful to make sure no one I spoke to knew exactly where the girl is. But you need to be careful. Victor is dangerous and he won't give up easily. That night, Robert went to Celia's house and told her everything Mark had discovered. Celia was silent for a long time after he finished, looking toward the room where Isabella was sleeping. That poor child, she said finally, her voice full of pain. To lose her mother so young and not even be by her side at the end. It's not fair. None of this is fair. Life isn't fair, Mom, Robert said bitterly. But we can try to make it a little less unfair, at least for Isabella. And this uncle who's appeared, this Frank, do you think he'll want to take her? Robert sighed. I don't know, but if he does, I can't stop him. He's blood family. He has more right than I do. Celia looked at her son, with the wisdom of someone who has lived a long life. Blood right isn't the same as heart right, son. This girl has already formed a bond with you, with us. Tearing her away from here now could be just as traumatic as everything she's already been through. 2 days later, Frank Peterson called. He had talked to his wife, explained the whole situation, and they had decided they wanted to meet Isabella. Robert arranged to meet them at a neutral location, a park in Brooklyn, on Saturday morning. When the day came, Robert was nervous in a way he never was, not even in the most important meetings of his life. He had explained to Isabella that she was going to meet her uncle, her mother's brother, but he hadn't gone into detail about what that might mean. She had been quiet upon hearing the news, and Robert couldn't decipher what she was feeling. Frank Peterson was a man of 45, his hair starting to grey, with simple framed glasses and casual but neat clothes. His wife, Paula, was younger, maybe in her 40s, with a gentle smile and a calm demeanour. They arrived at the park on time, and when they saw Isabella, something changed in both their faces. Frank approached slowly, knelt down to the girl's level, and Robert saw his eyes fill with tears. "You look just like Anna when she was a little girl," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be crying, but seeing you is like seeing my sister again." Isabella looked at her uncle with curiosity, but also with caution. "You knew my mom?" she asked softly. "I did. We grew up together, played together. She was the best sister anyone could have, but we had a stupid fight. When we were adults and I was too proud to apologize. Now she's gone and I'll never get to tell her I'm sorry." Frank spent the next hour talking to Isabella, telling stories about Anna when she was young, showing old photos he had brought on his phone. Paula also talked with her, gentle and patient, asking about the things she liked, if she enjoyed drawing, playing, watching cartoons. And Robert sat on a bench, watching it all, his heart torn between the relief that Isabella had family who seemed to genuinely care and the fear of losing her. After Isabella went to play on the playground with Paula, supervising closely, Frank sat next to Robert. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "Thank you for saving her. If you hadn't stopped on that sidewalk, I don't know what would have happened to Isabella. She could have disappeared or worse." "I just did what anyone should do," Robert replied. "But most people don't," Frank said. "Most people walk right by, pretend they didn't see. You didn't walk by, and that made all the difference. Paula and I have talked a lot these past few days. We want to offer Isabella a home. She's family, and we can't leave her without a place to stay. But we also understand that she's already formed a bond with you and your mother." Paula suggested something. "What if we do a gradual transition? Isabella could continue living with your mother for now, and we would visit regularly, building the bond slowly. When she's ready, she can come live with us in Albany, but no rush, no pressure. What do you think?" Robert felt such a wave of relief that he could barely respond. "I think that's perfect," he said finally. "It's important for Isabella to know you, to know she has family, but it's also important that she's not torn away from everything she's starting to know as safety." They talked a little longer, working out the details, and when they left the park that morning, there was an agreement between them. Isabella would continue to live with Celia for the time being. Frank and Paula would visit every weekend, and when the girl was emotionally ready, she would move to Albany. But there would be no pressure, no rush. Everything would be done with Isabella's best interests at heart, not what was most convenient for the adults. But while this part of Isabella's life was being resolved, there was still the matter of Victor Mendez. Mark had gathered enough evidence on his activities, and Robert had contacted a detective he knew, Detective Sanchez, explaining the situation. Sanchez had taken an interest in the case and promised to investigate. A week later, in a quiet operation, the police arrested Victor Mendez. They found documents in his house from several children he had used over the years, hidden money, and most shockingly, photos. Photos of all the children who had passed through his hands, including Isabella. It was as if he collected his victims, keeping records of the suffering he caused. When Robert heard about the arrest, he felt a deep satisfaction, but also an immense sadness, knowing how many children had suffered at the hands of that man. Sanchez assured him that Victor wouldn't be getting out anytime soon, that this time the evidence was too solid, and that several of his former victims were finding the courage to testify now that they knew he was in jail. The fake social worker, Marissa, was also arrested. They discovered she had been Victor's accomplice for years, had fake documents, and had helped kidnap several children over time. The entire scheme was being dismantled, and Robert felt that he was finally doing something that truly mattered, something much bigger than closing deals or increasing profits. But amidst all these victories, there was something Robert still hadn't resolved. The issue with his own daughter, Sophia. He hadn't seen her in months, their calls were increasingly rare, and he knew he was completely losing touch with her. One night, after returning from another visit to Celia's house where he had dinner with Isabella, he finally gathered the courage and called Caroline. She answered after several rings, her voice cautious. "Robert, is something wrong?" "No, everything's fine. I just wanted to talk. It's been a while since we really talked." There was a silence on the other end, and Robert imagined Caroline processing the fact that he was calling for no specific reason, which was rare. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's talk." Robert told her everything. He told her about Isabella, about how he had found her being humiliated on the street, about how he had decided to help, about everything he had discovered in the past few days. He told her how taking care of Isabella had made him realize all the times he hadn't been there for Sophia, all the wrong choices he had made, all the pain he had caused. And for the first time in 5 years, he admitted, "I messed up, Caroline. I messed up badly. I prioritized work, money, success, and I lost you and Sophia in the process. And I know there's no going back. I know I can't undo what's been done, but I wanted you to know that I get it now. I get what I lost." Caroline was silent for a long time after he finished speaking. When she replied, her voice was softer than Robert had expected. "Robert, I never wanted to keep you away from Sophia. I wanted you to be present. It was never about the money, never. It was about you sitting down with her for dinner, watching a movie together, asking how her day at school was. It was about you being there, not just physically, but emotionally too." "I know that now," Robert said, "and I know it's probably too late, but I wanted to try. I wanted to try to be Father Sophia deserves, if you'll give me a chance." "It's not too late, Robert," Caroline said, and there was something in her voice that sounded like hope. "Sophia still loves you. She just doesn't know how to approach you. But if you're really willing to change, to be truly present, then I think we can try. Not as a couple, that ended a long time ago, but as parents, as people who want what's best for our daughter." Robert felt the tears come again, but this time they were tears of relief, of gratitude. I promise I'll do things differently. This time, Caroline, I promise." After hanging up, Robert sat on the sofa of his apartment for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. His life had completely changed in a matter of weeks. He had found Isabella, had discovered a sense of purpose he didn't know was missing, and now he had a chance to reconnect with Sophia, to maybe, finally, be the father he should have been from the start. The next day, Robert went to pick up Sophia in Stamford. Caroline had prepared the girl, had explained about Isabella, about how her father was helping. A child in need. Sophia was curious, had asked a million questions, and when she saw Robert waiting at the door, she hesitated for only a second before running into his arms. "Hi, Dad," she said, and Robert hugged his daughter so tightly that she laughed. "You're squishing me, Dad." Sorry, he said, loosening his grip but not wanting to let go. "I just missed you." "I missed you too," Sophia said, and looked at her father with those eyes that were just like her mother's. "Mom told me about Isabella. Can I meet her?" Robert had planned to introduce the two girls slowly, but seeing Sophia's genuine enthusiasm, he decided to take a chance. "Of course you can. Want to go now?" They went to Celia's house, and when they got there, Isabella was in the garden helping her grandma water the plants. When she saw Robert arrive with an unknown girl, she became shy, hiding a little behind Celia, but Sophia had no shyness at all. She approached slowly, smiled her wide smile and said, "Hi, I'm Sophia. My dad told me about you. Do you want to play with me?" Isabella looked at Robert as if asking for permission, and he gave her an encouraging nod. Slowly she nodded her head at Sophia. "Okay," she said softly. And then something beautiful happened. The two girls went into the garden and started to play. Sophia invented games, made Isabella laugh, and slowly the younger girl came out of her shell, allowing herself to be a child, something that had been denied to her for so long. Robert and Celia watched from the porch, and neither of them could hold back their tears. "You did a good thing, son," Celia said, placing a hand on Robert's shoulder. "You saved that girl. But more than that, you saved yourself too. You remembered what really matters in life." Robert hugged his mother, grateful to have her, grateful that he had had the courage to stop on that sidewalk weeks ago, grateful that he had made the right choice when he could have easily walked right by like so many others did. But even amidst all that gratitude, he knew the story wasn't over yet. There were still things to resolve, still challenges ahead, still a long journey until Isabella was completely healed from everything she had been through. And there was also the matter of rebuilding his relationship with Sophia, of proving to her that this time he was really present, really changed. But for the first time in a long time, Robert felt he was on the right path. He had found something no amount of money could buy: purpose, redemption, and the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of people who truly needed him. And as he watched the two girls playing in the garden, laughing and just being kids, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. True peace, the kind of peace that comes from knowing you're doing the right thing, that you're being the person you should have been all along. 3 months had passed since that day on Fifth Avenue. New York was still the city that never stops, with its millions of inhabitants rushing from one place to another, but for a few specific people, everything had changed in a way that would never be the same again. Isabella was different, not completely healed, because traumas like that don't heal quickly, but visibly happier, more secure. She had gained a little weight, which made Celia happy every time she noticed, and the wounds on her feet had completely healed. She was now attending a private school, a small, welcoming place where the teachers knew her story and were patient on the days she was more withdrawn, more scared for no apparent reason. Slowly she was making friends, learning to trust again, rediscovering what it meant to be a child. Frank and Paula came to visit her every weekend, as agreed. Their sons, 2 curious and kind teenagers, had fallen in love with their little cousin and always brought gifts, books, games. Isabella had formed a beautiful bond with them. And everyone knew that soon she would move to Albany, but there was no longer any rush. The important thing was that she felt ready, that the transition was smooth and not traumatic. Robert was different too. He had discovered something that all the money in the world couldn't give him: true purpose. He still worked, still managed his business, but he was no longer obsessed with it. He had learned to delegate, to trust his team, to leave on time so he could have dinner with his mother and Isabella, or pick up Sophia from school on his weekends with her. Caroline had been surprised and a little skeptical at first, but she gradually realized that the change in him was real, that it wasn't just a phase that would pass. Sophia had also transformed. Seeing her father take care of Isabella had affected her in a profound way. She had begun to understand that people can change, that past mistakes don't define who you are forever, and that the most important thing is what you do from now on. She and Isabella had formed a beautiful friendship, the kind of sisterly bond that doesn't share blood but shares something deeper. The experience of being saved by the same man who had learned to be better. But while everything seemed to be heading toward a happy ending, there was still one thing that needed to happen, a moment that needed to be lived for the cycle to truly close. On a Saturday morning, Robert woke up with a clear idea in his head. He called Frank and Paula, explained what he wanted to do, and they immediately agreed. Then he called Caroline, who also supported the idea, and then he went to Celia's house to talk to Isabella. The girl was in the garden, drawing in a notebook Sophia had given her. She had discovered a love for drawing and spent hours creating colorful worlds full of flowers, houses, and happy families. Robert sat next to her on the wooden bench, watching her drawing for a moment before speaking. "Isabella, I wanted to talk to you about something important," he said gently. She stopped drawing and looked at him with those big, attentive eyes. "Is it about me going to live with Uncle Frank?" she asked, and there was no fear in her voice, only curiosity. "No, it's not about that." "Well, not exactly," Robert corrected. "It's about your mom, Anna." Isabella's face changed. She lowered her eyes to her drawing, and Robert saw her small fingers tighten around the colored pencil. She rarely spoke about her mother, and everyone had respected that, knowing she would talk when she was ready. "You know your mum loved you very much, right?" Robert continued. "Uncle Frank told me stories about her, about how she was a strong and brave person, about how she fought so hard to take care of you even when she was sick. She wanted you to have a good life full of beautiful things and love." "I know," Isabella said softly. "Sometimes I dream about her. In the dream, she's okay, not sick anymore, and we're in a nice house, and she's smiling." Robert felt his heart ache. "Isabella, you never got the chance to say goodbye to your mum, to say farewell. And I was thinking that maybe it's important for us to do that now. Not in the traditional way, but in a special way, just for you." Isabella looked up, confused. "How do we do that?" Robert explained his idea. He had found out where Anna was buried, in a small, simple cemetery in the Bronx. He wanted to take Isabella there along with the whole family, Frank, Paula, her cousins, Sophia, Caroline, Celia, everyone together so that Isabella could finally say goodbye, lay flowers, speak what was in her heart. It wouldn't be a forced, sad occasion. It would just be a farewell, a closure, a moment to honor the memory of a mother who had fought so hard. Isabella was silent for a long time, processing, and then, slowly, she nodded. "I want to go," she said. "I want to tell my mom that I'm okay now, that people are taking care of me, that she doesn't have to worry anymore." The following Sunday, they all met at the cemetery. It was a day of soft sun, with the kind of light that makes everything seem gentler and less harsh. Anna's grave was simple, a small headstone with her name, the dates, and a phrase Frank had added when he learned his sister had passed. "Beloved sister, may you find peace. I'm so sorry I wasn't here." Isabella held Robert's hand with one hand and Frank's with the other. Sophia was on the other side, holding a bouquet of white flowers they had chosen together at a flower shop. Paula and her teenage sons were there, Celia and Caroline too. It was a strange family, assembled from pieces that didn't fit in a traditional way, but together formed something beautiful and strong. Frank was the first to speak. "Anna sis," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry for everything. I'm sorry we fought, that I was too proud to apologize, that you went through everything alone. But I want you to know that I'm going to take care of Isabella. Now she'll have a family, she'll have love, She'll have everything you wanted to give her, I promise. Paula spoke next, her voice gentle. Anna, I never had the chance to meet you, but I know your daughter, and she's an incredible girl. Strong, brave, full of love to give. You did a wonderful job raising her, and I'll continue where you left off. I'll love her as if she were my own daughter. Celia stepped forward, placing a hand on Isabella's shoulder. Anna, dear, I've been your daughter's borrowed grandmother these past few months, and it has been an honor to care for her. She is a blessing, and I know that wherever you are at peace, knowing she is safe and loved. Robert was next. He cleared his throat, trying to control his emotion. Anna, I didn't know you, but I saved your daughter. Or maybe she saved me. I was lost, focused on the wrong things in life, and Isabella showed me what truly matters. She gave me a second chance to be the person I should have been all along. Thank you for raising such a special, strong girl. I will make sure she always remembers you, that she knows how much she was loved. And then it was Isabella's turn. She let go of Robert's and Frank's hands and stepped forward alone, standing very close to the headstone. For a long moment, she just stood there, looking at her mother's name carved in the stone. And then she began to speak, her voice small but firm. Mum, I know you're not here anymore, but I wanted to say a few things. First, I wanted to say that I love you, so much, and I know you tried to take care of me as much as you could. I know you got sick and that the bad man tricked you, but it wasn't your fault. You were always a good mom. Isabella paused, swallowing the tears that were starting to fall. And I wanted to tell you that I'm okay now. I have Uncle Frank and Aunt Paula, I have my cousins, I have Grandma Celia, I have Robert and Sophia. There are a lot of people taking care of me, Mum. I'm not alone anymore. I'm not hungry or cold or scared anymore. I have a home now, a family. You can rest, in peace, Mum. You don't have to worry about me anymore. And then, with a gesture that broke everyone's heart, Isabella placed the bouquet of white flowers on the headstone and blew a kiss from her fingertips, then gently touched the cold stone. Bye, Mom, she said. I'll miss you forever, but I'm going to be okay, I promise. There wasn't a dry eye there. Robert was crying openly, not caring who saw. Frank was holding Paula, both of them shaking with emotion. Celia had her hands over her heart. And even the teenagers, who had come not quite knowing what to expect, were visibly moved. Caroline held Sophia, who was also crying, touched by the farewell of the girl she had come to love like a sister. After the cemetery, they all went to lunch together at a family restaurant in the Bronx. It was a long lunch, full of stories, laughter, and also tears. Frank told more stories about Anna, about their childhood, about how she had always been his protector, even though she was younger. Paula talked about how excited she was to have Isabella living with them, about the room they were preparing, about their plans for the future. The teenagers showed Isabella photos of their house in Albany, of the big backyard where she could play, of the school she would attend. And Isabella, for the first time since Robert had found her on that sidewalk, allowed herself to completely relax. She laughed at the jokes her cousins made, talked excitedly with Sophia about the drawings they would make together, ate without rushing and without that fear that the food would run out. She was finally allowing herself to be a child, allowing herself to believe that this wasn't temporary, that she had truly found a home. Robert watched it all with a sense of fulfillment he had never felt in business. He had saved a life. Not only that, he had helped rebuild a life, to give a child the chance to grow up with love, security, and dignity. And in the process, he had saved himself too. He had reconnected with Sophia, had reconnected with his mother, had learned what truly mattered. That night, as he was taking Isabella back to Celia's house, she said something that would be etched in Robert's heart forever. They were in the car and she was looking out the window, watching the lights of New York pass by. "Robert," she said, and he looked in the rearview mirror to see her little face. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for not walking by like the other people. You saved me." Robert felt the tears return. "No, Isabella," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. "I think you're the one who saved me. You showed me what I had forgotten, reminded me of what really matters in life. I should be thanking you." Isabella smiled, that sweet smile that had become more frequent in recent weeks. "Then we saved each other," she said, with the kind of wisdom children sometimes have and adults forget. "Yeah," Robert agreed, smiling through his tears. "I think that's exactly what we did." A month later, the day came for Isabella to move to Albany. It was hard for everyone, especially for Celia, who had gotten used to having the girl at home, making her breakfast, hearing her laughter in the garden. But everyone knew it was the right thing, that Isabella needed a permanent family, a stable routine, a place that was truly hers. The farewell was full of tears, but also of promises. Isabella would visit New York every month. Robert and Sophia would visit her in Albany whenever they could. It wasn't a goodbye, just a see you later. And as Frank's car pulled away with Isabella waving from the back window, everyone on the sidewalk knew they had done something beautiful, something that would mark their lives forever. Robert went home that night and sat on the sofa of his apartment, which once seemed so empty but was now full of good memories. He thought about everything that had happened since that afternoon on Fifth Avenue, how a simple act of stopping and paying attention had changed so many lives. He thought of Anna, of how she had fought to the end for her daughter, and how in some way he had managed to honor that fight by ensuring Isabella had the future Anna wanted for her. He also thought of Valerie, the manager of that store who had humiliated Isabella. She had been fired after the story got out, but Robert felt no satisfaction in that. He only felt sadness for living in a society where people like her thought it was normal to treat children like trash, where empathy had become so rare that a simple act of kindness became news. But he also thought of the good people he had met along the way. Juliana, the cleaning lady who had warned him about the man exploiting Isabella. Detective Sanchez, who had taken the case seriously and made sure Victor was arrested. Dr. Evans, who had cared for Isabella with such kindness. Frank and Paula, who had opened their hearts and their home to a niece they didn't even know existed. And his own mother, Celia, who had taken Isabella in without asking questions, with that unconditional love only mothers can give. Robert realized that night that the world had as many good people as bad, that the difference was in which side you chose to be on. And he had made his choice. He had chosen to stop when he could have walked by. He had chosen to get involved when he could have remained indifferent. He had chosen to fight when he could have given up. And now, looking back, he knew it was the best deal he had ever closed in his life. There was no financial profit. It wouldn't appear in any company report. It wouldn't win any business awards. But it had something much more valuable. It had made a difference in the life of a child who desperately needed someone to believe in her, to see her worth, to fight for her. Isabella had started dreaming again. She had started to believe that the world could be good, that people could be kind, that she deserved love and care. And Robert had learned that true success isn't measured in money or power, but in how many lives you touch, how much love you can spread, how much of a difference you make. A few months later, Robert started a foundation. He called it the Anna Peterson Institute in honor of Isabella's mother. The foundation's mission was to help children on the streets, offer support to vulnerable families, and combat child exploitation. He invested a significant portion of his fortune in it and hired competent, passionate people to work on the project. It wasn't empty charity, it was a real commitment to social change. And every time the foundation saved a child, every time a family received the support they needed, every time an exploiter was arrested and punished, Robert thought of that afternoon on Fifth Avenue, of that little girl with her hands on the window, of that pink dress that had been the beginning of it all. Today, years later, Isabella is a happy and healthy teenager. She still draws, dreaming of becoming an artist one day. She visits Robert regularly, and he remains a constant presence in her life, as does Sophia, whom she considers a true sister. Frank and Paula were the parents she needed, giving her love, structure, and security. And Celia continues to be her grandma of the heart, always with a warm hug, and a piece of cake waiting for her visits. Isabella's story could have ended tragically, as it does for so many invisible children on the streets of big cities, but it didn't. It ended with hope, with love, with proof that one person can make a difference, that stopping to pay attention to someone in need isn't weakness, It's the greatest strength there is. And it all started with a dress in a window, a girl with dreams no one saw, and a man who decided not to walk by. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Isabella, Robert, and all the people who crossed their paths has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of redemption, love, and hope, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Was it when Robert stood up for Isabella on the sidewalk? Was it the emotional farewell at the cemetery? Or was it his reunion with Sophia? Every day, we bring intense and true stories like this one that reveal the deepest side of the human soul, that remind us that small gestures can change entire lives. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that there is still goodness in the world, that it's still worth believing in people, that it's never too late to start over. We'll see you in the next episode, with more stories that will make you reflect on what truly matters in life. Until then, and remember, you too can be the difference in someone's life. All it takes is stopping and paying attention to who is right beside you.